1954. Dien Bien Phu, Vietnam. The scenario was as grim as the jungle surrounding it. A French garrison, 56 days under siege, their fortifications crumbling under relentless Viet Minh artillery. The smoke had barely cleared when French General de Castries surrendered. 10,000 soldiers marched into captivity. An empire crumbled, and in the silence that followed, the Cold War leaned forward, eyes fixed on Southeast Asia. France was done. But the world was not finished with Vietnam. The Geneva Accords of 1954 sliced the country in two. The North fell under Ho Chi Minh, communist, nationalist, relentless. The South propped up by Western hands, fragile from the moment it was born. The promise was simple: reunification elections in 2 years. That promise was never kept, and from that broken promise, a war would grow. Slow at first, like roots beneath concrete, then violent, unstoppable, world-altering. Washington watched with cold dread. If Vietnam fell to communism, the theory went, the rest of Southeast Asia would follow. Domino by domino. Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, the Philippines. The logic was neat on paper and catastrophic in practice, but in the early 1960s, it drove every decision made in the Oval Office. President Kennedy sent advisors, thousands of them, men in green berets who trained South Vietnamese soldiers and told themselves this wasn't a war. Then Kennedy was gone, and Lyndon Johnson inherited a slow disaster. August 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin. The USS Maddox reported torpedo attacks by North Vietnamese patrol boats in international waters. A second attack was reported days later, one that almost certainly never happened. Radar ghosts, nervous sonar operators. It didn't matter. Congress handed Johnson a blank check. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed with near-unanimous support. The war machine shifted gears. March 1965. Da Nang, South Vietnam. The first combat Marines stepped off landing craft onto Vietnamese soil. They were met not by enemy fire, but by South Vietnamese women placing garlands around their necks. The cameras loved it. The generals reassured Washington, 6 months, maybe 12. The enemy would fold under American firepower. They were wrong. If you find yourself gripped by these stories, the kind of history that doesn't let go, you're exactly where you belong. Ground Zero Stories is built for people like you. Subscribe, join the community, and come back every week for the battles, the decisions, and the human cost that textbooks leave out. Because what came next, no one on that beach at Da Nang was ready for. The jungle had its own rules. The Viet Cong, the guerrilla fighters of the South, did not stand and fight. They vanished. They became the land itself. American soldiers moved through triple canopy jungle where the humidity pressed down like a fist, where visibility collapsed to nothing in seconds, where the enemy could be 10 feet away and invisible. The booby traps were everywhere. Punji pits, sharpened bamboo stakes hidden beneath thin layers of leaves, smeared with excrement to guarantee infection. Tripwires connected to grenades, rigged artillery shells buried in footpaths. Every step was a negotiation with death. Men lost friends to explosions that made no sound until it was too late. And then there were the tunnels. Cu Chi, hundreds of kilometers of underground passages, sleeping quarters, field hospitals, weapons caches, command rooms, burrowed beneath villages and rice paddies. The Viet Cong lived underground. American soldiers called the men brave or insane enough to go in after them tunnel rats. They crawled in with a pistol and a flashlight. The darkness was absolute. The silence, claustrophobic and total. Coming back out was never guaranteed. Meanwhile, American commanders measured success in body counts. If the numbers looked right, the war was being won. The numbers rarely told the truth. By 1967, over 500,000 American troops were deployed. B-52s dropped more tonnage on Vietnam than the entire Second World War in the Pacific. Agent Orange stripped entire forests bare. Napalm turned villages to flame. And still, the enemy did not break. The American public was told repeatedly that victory was close. The generals believed their own briefings. The soldiers in the field knew differently. Then came January 30th, 1968. Tet. It was the Vietnamese Lunar New Year, a supposed ceasefire. Fireworks lit the sky across the country. And under their cover, the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong launched coordinated attacks on more than 100 South Vietnamese cities and towns simultaneously. They struck the ancient city of Hue. They breached the walls of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. For a few terrifying hours, it seemed like the entire country was falling. Militarily, Tet was repelled. American and South Vietnamese forces pushed back hard. The Viet Cong suffered catastrophic losses from which they never fully recovered. But the battle was not won in the jungle. It was lost in the living room. Americans watched it on television, the chaos, the bodies, the embassy breach. Journalist Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, looked into the camera and said the war was a stalemate. If Cronkite had turned, Johnson knew, so had the country. Lyndon Johnson announced he would not seek re-election. The ground had shifted beneath the entire war. Richard Nixon came to power promising peace with honor. His strategy, Vietnamization. Train the South Vietnamese to fight their own war. Slowly pull American troops home. Secretly bomb Cambodia and Laos. The peace movement exploded in the streets. 4 students were shot dead at Kent State University by National Guard troops. The country was tearing itself apart. The Paris Peace Accords were signed in January 1973. American combat troops came home. Prisoners of war were released. But the war between North and South Vietnam continued. The South Vietnamese military, undersupplied and demoralized, began to collapse. April 1975. Saigon. The North Vietnamese army was at the gates. The city was falling. American helicopters flew mission after desperate mission from the roof of the U.S. Embassy, lifting evacuees from the rooftop as crowds surged below. Thousands of South Vietnamese who had worked alongside Americans, who had trusted American promises, were left behind. The last helicopter lifted off as North Vietnamese tanks rolled through the city. The gates of the presidential palace crashed open. The war was over. Nearly 60,000 Americans were dead. Over 1 million North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers. 2 million South Vietnamese civilians. The land was poisoned, bombed, and burned. Hundreds of thousands of refugees took to the sea in boats, risking everything to escape what came next. The wall in Washington, D.C. bears 58,281 names, each one a life, a son, a daughter, a father, a brother. Names carved in black granite that reflects your own face back at you when you look at them, as if to remind you that this history is not distant. It lives in the people who came home broken, in the families who never stopped grieving, in a nation that has never fully reckoned with what was done in its name and what was lost in the doing. Vietnam was not a mistake with a clean lesson. It was a tragedy with layers of ideology, of hubris, of courage, of atrocity, of sacrifice that deserved better than the cause it served. The jungle is quiet now. The tunnels still exist beneath the earth, and the names remain on the wall, patient and permanent, waiting to be read.